You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hey folks, welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. On this bonus episode, I am talking with Sam Hamm. We were originally talking about the movie Never Cry Wolf, which is one of his first gigs. This is the second part of our interview where I shifted gears a little bit and was asking him about some other things, including his version of the Fantastic Four. I know last time we talked a lot about Batman, and when I look up your name, that's the thing that always comes to the top. You know, Sam Hamm, he worked on Batman. I am curious, though, this was one of your first gigs, if I'm correct, working on Never Cry Wolf. And how did you come to that? And if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you how you kind of got into the screenwriting business.
Those are actually slight variations on the same question, because Never Cry Wolf was the first actual production that I ever worked on. I, written a couple of spec screenplays and stuff like that before, but the way I got into it is actually kind of hilarious. It is a fluke that I'm in the movie business at all. I had a couple of buddies in the late 70s, and we were all sitting around semi-employed with and not much to do, sort of like, as people in the pandemic of today. We decided that, since we had a lot of free time, maybe we should put it to good use. And we would hole up in a room for, 10 days and see if we could write a screenplay. And we actually did. And it was a pretty bad screenplay. It was about a new wave band and, various shenanigans and so forth and so on. The weird thing that happened was one of us had a good friend who was the daughter of J. Preston Allen. And I don't know if you know Jay's name or not, but she was a pretty influential screenwriter in her day. She wrote Hitchcock's Marnie, and she wrote Cabaret, and she wrote Prince of the City and all of this kind of stuff. And it turned out that she had a development deal with Warner Brothers. She was partnered with Sidney Lumet, and, they were going to do some pictures together. And they were also going to develop some other projects on the side for Warner's. Two of us were horrified that the third guy had taken our crummy first draft and shown it to Jay's daughter, because we didn't think it was ready to be shown yet. Then we were even more horrified because we found out that the daughter had passed the draft on to Jay, and we were sort of like holding her out as our big hope. She was our best connection to the movie business, and we were furious that this guy had just kind of gone in behind the backs of the other two of us. He was very self-assured. He thought, well, we have this draft. Why not show it to people? The big shock came when Jay actually bought it for next to no money. She took out an option on it, and it was basically enough to pay our rent for 3 or 4 months each. And so we were very excited by this development. And the thing I did not find out until a couple of years later, I don't think it was the quality of the screenplay or the appeal of the idea or anything like that. But Jay's daughter, who was, our sort of connection to Jay, was at this point seriously thinking about moving to Kenya, where she wanted to work with the Kenyan National Theater Company. And Jay was looking for an excuse to keep her daughter in the United States. And so she made her the associate producer on this script, which her daughter had brought to her. I swear, I think to this day, the only reason I'm in the movie business is because Jay did not want her daughter to go and join the Kenyan Theater Company. But anyway, to get back to the second part of this story, Jay had done a couple of drafts of Never Cry Wolf, which her husband, Louis Allen, was one of the producers on. Louis Malle had been attached to it, and they were all set to go with Louis Malle, and they suddenly had financing troubles, and it got too late in the year to shoot. Part of it is it's because it's a movie set in the Arctic. There's only a very small window of time every year when you can shoot. You basically have from like March to August, and after that, there's no hope of having a film production. There's not even enough light during the daytime to shoot a movie up there. During the hiatus, they lost Louis Malle. They brought on Carol Ballard. And once Carol Ballard was attached, Disney came in as a financier. So the movie Never Cry Wolf became actually the first independent acquisition that was ever released through Disney. It was the first movie they ever released that they hadn't made in-house. because Jay did not want to go up into the Arctic and hang out with Carol Ballard and a bunch of wolves for several months at a time. She was looking for, somebody young, cheap, and malleable to throw into this job, and came to me and said, "Would you like to talk with these guys about it?" I said, "Sure." And I went in and took a couple of meetings with Carol Ballard and the other people in the production. And we had one meeting where he gave me this wolf stare. He gave me what I found out later was the famous Carol Ballard wolf stare. He sort of like turns and stares at you, and he gives you this look sort of like, "Ooh, is this guy going to kill me and eat me right here?" So I sort of like looked right back at him, not aggressively or anything, but sort of like, "And how are you today, sir?" But apparently he liked the way that I looked back at him, so I got the job. And I was up there for 2 stints. I think I was after Jay and before Ken Kesey, who was on the project he was on it for about 6 weeks. I was up there in the spring, and then they said, "Oh, we're bringing on Ken Kesey." And I thought, all right, well, I can't compete with Ken Kesey. And I went back to my apartment in Brooklyn, and I was just sort of goofing around. And he said, "Well, keep working, keep writing scenes and stuff like that." And I said, "Well, why am I going to write scenes? Ken Kesey is up there doing screenplays." So I get this frantic call one weekend, and they say, "Well, we found Ken Kesey face down in the bathtub, and he was tripping, and he almost drowned." somewhere in Skagway, Alaska, he had managed to come across some bad LSD. They called me up and they said, "Bring all the work you've done." I'd been back in Brooklyn for like a month and change. I hadn't done a lick work. I hadn't done any work. I said, "Well, I have to I have to do some stuff before I can come up, but I can come up like next Monday." And so I spent the next 48, 72 hours straight just trying to crank out some stuff that looked like I had actually been working on a script over this time period, and that's how I got to be on Never Cry Wolf. The picture was in production for a year, I guess, in 1980. They ran out of good weather and had to go back the following spring to do reshoots. And so I think before they were done, they actually had a total of something like 10 writers, including screenplay writers and narration writers. We had one of the biggest credits that the Writers Guild has ever awarded, because we had 3 screenwriters on the screenplay credit and then 3 writers on the narration credit. And, they had, it was wild. They had all kinds of different people. I think they had Michael Herr come in for a while, the guy that wrote Dispatches, the Vietnam book. He tried to do some voiceover for it, which he had also done on Apocalypse Now. It was wild. It was not a writer's showcase, I'll put it that way. If you look at the shooting continuity, where they, do a shot-by-shot thing with, all the dialogue, all the action, et cetera, it was only about 43 pages long. And most of it is you're out in nature and it's quiet and something happens. And maybe you hear a wolf howl or something like that. But, it wasn't the sort of thing where you go and see it and come away saying, "Hey, man, that was a sparkling, witty screenplay." I was like, 24, and I thought, okay, hey, great. I've got my name on an actual motion picture. This is incredible. My career is underway. And then I discovered that I, couldn't get a job of any kind for like the next 3 years. So it goes. I mean, the movie didn't come out until 1980. I want to say 4. It might have been 1983. Somewhere in there. It took about 3 years to come out because, the first cut, the Carol was a documentarian. That's where he started out. He was used to basically constructing a movie from 10 tons of footage. He would go out and he would shoot as much as he could on, whatever the subject of his film was, and would come back and put it together. And it would kind of evolve as he got more footage and more stuff to add. And as he, found new ways of putting it together. And so, it was kind of good training for me because the movie was kind of changing in his head. Every few days as he got more stuff, he would start to have new ideas and he would start to see new ways that the story could be told. And it was the first movie I'd ever worked on. And so, I didn't know that there were guys who just kind of like, went out and shot the scene. The scene didn't turn out the way they liked it. They went back and shot the scene again, just tried to make it fit to a pattern. He was always trying to sort of find the patterns that would make the movie hold together. It was good training for me, good experience. It's one of those situations where you never quite know what's going to happen on the location. you never quite know whether you're going to get the footage you need. And so you may have to sort of change the whole approach at the last minute. We had one stretch. There's a scene in the movie where Charlie Martin Smith is doing a bit where he's marking territory, and he's going around. He drinks tea and he pisses on a rock or something like that. He's waiting to see what the wolves will do when he starts marking their territory. And so we needed a shot of a wolf taking a piss on a rock, which seems like it should not be that hard to get, except we shot for a fucking week and a half, all day, every day, trying to get one shot of our three main wolves pissing on a rock, and we could not get it. And Carol was going, more and more frantic every day because, we were paying the whole crew to be out here. And it seemed, it was like the wolves were holding it in just to mess with us. I mean, they put Gatorade in their water. They did everything they could think of. If you watch the movie, you will see there's a moment when a wolf goes up and pisses on a rock. And what is actually happening is that his leg is being jerked upward by a wire. He doesn't lift his leg in the way that a wolf would normally lift his leg. He just happens to be passing a rock, and all of a sudden his leg jerks upward. And you cut away very, very quickly. Very quickly. Very, very quickly you cut away to Charlie Martin's face, and sort of nodding sagely as you hear the sound of wolf piss hitting the rock, dubbed over the shot. It was, there you go, man against nature. Carol against the wolves.
You went up, you came back, you went up. How long was that period from the first time you went up there to the last time you got back?
I think it was about 5 months. 5 months with an intervening month, because it was, I was up there from like March through May, and then came back like at the end of June and stuck around until mid-August, probably would be my guess. I would have to check that out to tell you for sure, but yeah, I was up there for a good long stretch. And we started out in northern British Columbia. We were actually out in the wilderness when I first came onto the picture. Everybody was living in trailers. We then came closer into civilization. We were out in Nome for a while, which was really interesting because, Nome, if you look at Alaska, it looks sort of like a profile of a face with a nose sticking out in the middle. And Nome is on the nose, and the roads in Nome only go about 30 miles outside of town, and then they stop. Everything that comes into Nome comes in by air. There is no real ground travel or anything like that. And it's actually closer to what was then the Soviet Union than it is to any sort of major population center in Alaska or Canada. We were out there for a while. That was a pretty bleak place because it was populated almost entirely by miners who wanted to go out and make a lot of money in a short amount of time and didn't care how miserable it made them. They just wanted to stockpile some money that they could take back home or send back home to their families. Any night of the week, you would go into a bar at 5 o'clock and order a beer, and by 5:30, most of the people in the bar were so drunk they were face down already. Kind of a bleak environment, I would say, but the cool thing is part of the time we were hanging out briefly in Skagway and Juneau, mostly in Skagway, which was the port of access for British Columbia. And it was weird in 1980 because the U.S. had an embargo, a trade embargo with Russia. And, the big deal was we couldn't take part in the Olympics. The port of Skagway, because it served British Columbia, was the only port on American soil where Russian ships could dock. And so as a result, the crew would be out shooting, and I would usually be, back in my hotel room writing whatever they needed, waiting for the next phone call. Hey, we need some this, we need some that, so forth and so on. And so I would usually have some free time in the afternoon, and I'd go over to one of the bars and shoot pool. And I got a chance to shoot pool with not only Russian sailors, but red Chinese sailors, which was highly entertaining. I thought, hey, I'm a small town kid, and here I am in Skagway, Alaska, shooting pool with the Russians and red Chinese. Didn't foresee that happening, put it that way.
I had a chance to read a draft from, I think, like June 79. Jay's name was on it, and Curtis Hansen's name was on it. And there are familiar beats, like the mice waking him
Right.
up, and just like there's certain things that I'm seeing in there, but it was still Farley Mowat's name as the main character. He hadn't been Tyler yet. And there were other, of course, differences as we went through there. When you got on there, what was the script like? And then what were some of the things that you added into it?
The draft that you read is probably pretty close to the one that was in existence when I came on, because I think the original one is Hansen. Jay had done a couple of sets of revisions. Richard Kletter wound up coming on the year after. He came on for the second year of shooting at some point after I was on it, and so the credit on the movie is Hansen, me, and Richard Kletter. The stuff that we added, a lot of it is just basically stuff that we found when we were making the movie that was interesting. The whole sort of subplot with the Inuit hunter who is trying to get his teeth replaced was basically result of casting that actor. And he, after a couple of weeks, did not want to be on the production at all. He was not enjoying himself. And the way that they kept him on the production was to promise him that his teeth would be ready by the time he finished his part. By the time he finished his shooting, he would get the false teeth. That subplot is one that was actually working itself out on the set as we were going along. But, it's a lot of it was just a matter of we have this situation, or we found this, trying to adapt to what's there, what we have. There was one moment that I remember vividly where there was a scene held over from Jay's draft. And it was a scene where Charles Martin Smith is sitting around a campfire listening to all of the Inuit telling sort of, their various tales, creation tales, and so forth and so on. Jay had put something in there about Lake Kuyak. And so I thought, all right, that seems like a good piece of grit, or, so I assumed, I figured there was a Lake Kuyak. And so I threw Lake Kuyak into the scene when I was doing a rewritten version of it. And I walked over to the set that night. They were shooting indoors in a warehouse. The Inuit actors started laughing and pointing at me and elbowing me, all kinds of stuff like that. And I'm going I went to the assistant director and I said, hey, what's going on? What's so funny? And they said, oh, well, they figured that was you. Kuyak is the Inuktitut word for fuck. So you have them telling some story about Lake Fuck. And I went I didn't even do it. I'm innocent. I swear. I didn't know. Apparently it seemed like something that I would do. So nobody believed me. Go figure.
Have you always been a troublemaker?
I didn't know I was.
You're in Alaska, which I've never been to Alaska, but from what I've seen, it's gorgeous. But what was the weather like? Was it a okay shoot? Was it miserable? Because just the story about the wolf not raising its leg for 5 days sounds like it could have just been a nightmare. It
usually wasn't too terrible. I mean, we had stretches where it was quite cold. I mean, when I first landed, it was parka weather. Everybody had their fur-lined hoods up, all that kind of stuff. We were there for stretches when it was fairly balmy. You could go out in a light windbreaker or something like that. Other times it was just cold. But yeah, I mean, it's incredibly beautiful. I mean, I got to see the aurora borealis at night for long stretches, which is one thing you don't forget. The landscape is just beautiful. We were shooting in Skagway, which is sort of an enclosed harbor on three sides with mountains around it. You understand why the cruise ships and stuff like that all want to come up there and stop. I mean, that was the main industry of Skagway, was tourism. And, so the streets are basically, bar, knick-knack shop, souvenir shop, bar, burger joint, bar, knick-knack shop, souvenir shop, scrimshaw shop, et cetera, et cetera. But, and, then you'd pass some place where they do like a nightly show where they dress up like the gay 90s and so forth. So the whole town existed. They were importing people every summer to come and staff the hotels because, there was a little stretch when they could make a lot of money. And it was, basically from May through August every year. After that stretch of clement weather and sunlight ended, you couldn't get people to go there for love or money.
So you were up there in 1980. The film doesn't come out until 83. What are you doing in the meantime? And do they even have the courtesy of like, hey, we're having the premiere. Come on out, Sam. Let's do this.
Oh, yeah, sure. We kept up with it, but the first cut of the movie was 4 hours long and it didn't have any wolf footage in it. Carol had not gotten around to the part where you insert the wolves into Never Cried Wolf. As you would expect, it was kind of, changing and evolving over this period of time. And it took 1980 and 1981 to shoot this up. And then they were trying to figure out how to make the narrative work because so much of it is internal. It's basically one guy. It's one guy who is alone in the wilderness. And, we kept trying to come up with ways to get the sort of necessary exposition across. He would talk to himself. He would talk to the wolves. He would, all of this kind of stuff. And, because Carol was violently opposed to using voiceover, then there was a point where they just kind of threw up their hands and said, well, we got to use some voiceover. And they did. And it worked fine. I mean, it's not intrusive. It gets you over some of the rough spots in the narrative where you don't quite know what the heck is going on.
Sam, thank you so much for your time. This was great talking with you.
Oh, it's easy and fun. Happy to gas on whenever I get the chance.